So this is the last topic for UCSP for this semester, economic and non-state institutions. So to recap, when we discussed about the politics and society, what were the three types of societies discussed? Correct. The answer is egalitarian, rank, and stratified societies. So I mentioned in the last discussion that those three concepts will be important this afternoon. Okay, so let's start first with defining what an economic institution is. Um, the economic institution is actually the institution that is in charge in the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services, right? So these are what we call our businesses, our banks, our corporations, or anything that keeps the economy rolling. Okay, so let's go back to the ancient types or the early types of socio-political organizations. Actually, there are four, but the most basic is actually these three: bands, tribes, and chiefdoms. Bands are a smaller group of people who group together to form a team. Let's just use the word team. No, usually there are less than 50 people, and less than 50, and usually this is a family. And then when you go to tribes, this is already a collection of families. There is now a leader. They have already elected a leader who, most often than not, ang ilang i-choose nga leader are those who are strong uh, and wise. And then when we have chiefdoms, these are like the collection of tribes. These are already big. And in chiefdoms, they already practice monarchy or a monarchical style of government that the next leader is actually determined based on based on succession. Okay, so four major organized activities. We're going to define this one by one. First is the access to resources, the mode of production, the distribution of goods and services, and last, the consumption of goods and services. Okay, so let's start with access to resources. No, it's very understandable what access of resources. No, this is organized based on societal membership or based on an individual's capability to acquire resources. So there are two types, the egalitarian and the stratified. So the egalitarian provides opportunity to members of a group to gain equal access to resources. No, but stratified is access to the resources depending only on how much money he has inside his or her pockets. Later on, go on. Let's see which of the three basic social political organizations practices this kinds of activities. Mode of production is a way of organizing production. Okay, first is the domestic, and second is the surplus. When we say domestic, goods are produced for local consumption only. That means that the goods and services they produce are only for their people alone. But when you say surplus, surplus is created when there is an excess in supply over demand. No, kanang mas daghang supply kaysa sa giganahan. Sa to pa na ay sobra, ba? So we have societies that has surplus mode of production is they have bartering as a motive. Next is the distribution of goods and services. It can be egalitarian, which means there is equal distribution, or stratified, which depends on how much you can actually afford. And in the consumption of goods and services, it can be strategic or controlled, which is concerned about sustainability. That means that when they produce their goods, they actually think of tomorrow. or whether they can sustain or they can still have food in the coming days. But when you say conspicuous consumption, that means that they consume whatever is available sa what is available. So kanang if they could produce 100 sacks of rice for Monday, then they will have to consume that for Monday. That is conspicuous. So that means that they do not actually think of what to eat if they will have something to eat in the next coming days. Okay, so this is now the summary of the basic social political organizations and the major activities. So you will see here that bands and tribes actually have the same in organized activities, and chiefdoms actually are is the one that's different. So when you say access mo good to resources in the bands and tribes, all that they have produced or kaning sa all that they have produced, they actually put that in like what we call a city center or kind of more like headquarters ganing nila, and then they equally divide all those resources into how many families or how many individuals in their community, in the community. So there is equal access regardless of kinsaka. And then also for domestic, they only produce for their own tribes and bands. Whereas in chiefdoms, they already, since chiefdoms is as a layman's definition of a chiefdom, it is like a group of tribes. So they have now the idea of trading. So they have surplus. And then the distribution is stratified since they already have a leadership or a defined leadership na unahon jud nila og feed, they have to feed the royal, what we call the royal family or the first family first, and their consumption of goods and services, it's already controlled since because of the number of members in their chiefdom. Okay, so distribution systems, we have reciprocity, redistribution, and the market exchange. So when we say reciprocity, there is direct exchange of goods and services. So sharing with others, gift giving, mutual feasting, and barter. So this concept began with an essay by Marcel Mauss titled The Gift. So according to Yang essay, he studied the ceremonial exchange traditions of the Potlatch and the Kula. Kula. Koan. Sa Potlatch, they are in the Northwest Pacific Coast, American Indians, and the Kula are Melanesian interislanders. No, so Potlatch ceremonial distribution of property and gifts to affirm or reaffirm social status. So as uniquely institutionalized by the American Indians of the Northwest Pacific Coast. But whereas in the Kula, the exchange in which the system of exchange in which prestige items, necklaces, and arm shells are ceremoniously exchanged with a concomitant trade in useful goods. So the idea mongod of reciprocity is, according to Marcel Mauss, is that you give in order to receive back. Na siya, idea sa iya ha. So this is an example of the potlatch. Okay, so in reciprocity, there are three types of reciprocity, or the three main forms. The first is the generalized. The value of what is given is not calculated and repayment is not specified. So this is like a mother's obligation or a mother's as on to her child. No, now the child is actually not expected to pay back because it could not be given. Pero contrary to what's to the popular kuan gani karon, I don't know if you're actually aware of that, but there is a movement right now. Well, it's not actually a movement, but there is a clamor that your children are not your retirement plans. No. But that's a generalized reciprocity that a mother's responsibility to her child, a teacher's responsibility to the students, and so-called and so on and so forth. No. When we say balance is a direct obligation to reciprocate in equal value for the relationship to continue. Like for example, when you say in politics, no, you're a good man, but you need to you want to win in the elections. And since you do not have money, so there will be some individuals or companies that will actually come to you and tell you, would you like us to sponsor you? So, okay, sige. But when you win the elections, it's not actually a thank you. It's not actually just a thank you, but you also have to give in something in return. So, what if you are having a project of highway, building a highway or building a con, and then the company that sponsored you is a construction company. So one way or another, you will have to give favor to that company, diba? In return for the favor that they have helped you. And we actually have this culture in the Philippines, the utang na loob or the debt of gratitude, which is supposed to be a very beautiful culture, but it is very open to abuses. No. So Muna siya, that is a debt of gratitude. And the negative reciprocity, the giver tries to get the better deal, end of the deal. So in Bisaya, this is what we call I forgot. Oh my God, I'll try to think. Okay. In Bisaya, it's called bintahosa. So you will in the change or in the exchange that would happen, you would want to identify um whether you can get the most deal without giving up a lot. Okay, so redistribution. This is the centralization of goods to an authority through tribute or taxation systems, and their allocation later to the groups and individuals within its jurisdiction. So if you go back to the early social political organizations, well, they have what we call the big man. It's a generalized term for their leaders. No, they give the money or their income to the big man as an acknowledgement to his authority, and then that big man would actually is the one that's actually distributing that income to the constituents. In modern day, it is called taxes, diba? So the Filipino citizens or any citizens in any country actually give or pay taxes to the government, and then these taxes are actually returned to the government in the form of government services. Yes, also salaries of government officials, government salaries of politicians. That is redistribution. And then when we say market exchange, this is the type of distribution system that we have now in the development of money. So goods and services are exchanged in the market and involves the use of money in the transaction. So in a market exchange, there has to be four elements: money, prices, supply and demand, and private ownership. You have to have private ownership kay alangan pud og if if there's no private ownership, then you can sell practically anything even if it's not yours. So for example, I need money now because I want to buy the latest iPhone, or I know I don't like an iPhone because I want to travel to Paris. So I'll sell Lip Plaza, one of the biggest department stores in Dumaguete City. I'll sell Lip Plaza even if it's not mine, diba? So that's impossible. So you need private ownership. Right. When we say market here, it's not the physical market or the wet market or the supermarket that we think, no. This is actually um, a social construct where particular social relationships and frameworks wherein economic transactions take place. So that means that you are when you say you are in the market for a husband, that means that you are available and that you're looking for a husband. It does not necessarily mean that you are going to build a business because you are looking for a husband. Pero kung makita kang magama kang dating sites like that, no. Pero market is like it's an invisible playing field. So economic revolutions. This is how our economies, eco, economic society evolved. I will not I will not go into details because we already had this actually in the early parts of our course. This is agricultural, industrial, and then when we shifted to information. So we had agricultural. is when our society only had a minimum number of people, but and everybody were farmers. However, when our population grew because of the Neolithic revolution, there is already a kanang no uncontrolled births. Our population grew, so there had to be a division of labor, and not everybody could should be farmers. Some should be gatherers, some should be hunters, but some should be teachers, and so called and so forth. Some could be cooks, and because of their division of labor, they created specialization. The farmers learned how to develop their own farming skills. And when they developed their farming skills, they also developed with them machineries to create or to make their work easy and fast. And that is the now the industrial revolution. And then when those inventions were because of the inventions, they also made communication easy and boundaryless or borderless, and that is the information evolution which we are having right now. Okay, so non-state institutions are institutions that are free from government control. So these are also the institutions that also help in the control of economic activity here in the world, in our society. So first is the corporation, second banks, cooperatives, and labor unions. So when you say corporations, these are actually the big businesses that we have today, and they provide work for people and provide taxes for the government. And then the corporations are actually the partners of the government in providing government services. No, if you're going to um, look back in the kaning calamities that we had in the past few months or years, you would notice that um, uh, you would notice in the news that there is not actually much activity from the government, diba? DSWD, there is still a lot of issues going on. Like for example, in the during the Yolanda, they discovered a few months or years after when they opened this kaning mga warehouses that there are mga donated goods from other organizations and other nations no that na expire na lamang because the DSWD did not actually distribute it to the intended receivers. So on who are actually helping during the calamities? These are the private institutions or the corporations, because by law, corporations are actually required to have um, a corporate social responsibility or a foundation. That's why when you have ABS-CBN, we have the Kapamilya Foundation, Asagip Kapamilya, and the Kapuso, they has I'm not sure with Kapuso, they have Kapuso Foundation, right? Muna siya corporation. And then banks. Banks actually has a big function in the economy. Not just do they um, provide an avenue to save your money and to grow interest, but in actuality, if you're going to look at advertisements by banks, I don't know, they always want you to save they always want you to deposit your money in banks, and then they would also tell you to you should save first before you spend, uh, because kanang marag to be invested in your future. But in reality, guys, the reason why banks always have to advertise that way is because they want you to deposit money, not for their not just for their business growth, but because of the reasons that one of the functions of the banks is to regulate money supply in society. Why? Because if there is so much money in circulation, it causes inflation. And we are actually experiencing a hyperinflation right now in the Philippines. That's why katong when there is a katong when there was financial crisis in the US, you're too young to remember that one. The Philippines did not really feel it because we are already in a financial crisis even before that happened. So more gamay ra kay siya na impact kay karon pa sa nag financial crisis karon daan na tangga experience ana, right? So cooperatives are also organizations that are functioning as a quasi bank, but it's exclusive to its members na siya. And then kuha na siya, kanang what you see here in Dumaguete, the PHCCI, DCCO, these are already big organizations in cooperatives, but in some areas, like in some barangays or some barrios, um, cooperatives are actually kanang also can be in the form of a grocery store where you can, if you want to buy goods, buy products, but you don't have money and you're a member of that cooperative, you can also you can buy there and ilistara, or you can get the goods on utang, but you have to pay it later on, or they will deduct it to you in your savings. Masya, that's cooperative. It's also a way of helping the economy of a certain place to grow siya. And then labor unions, we have two here in Silliman, the Silliman University Staff Association and the Silliman University Faculty Association. So these organizations actually help negotiate with the administration to help its members increase their benefits, salaries and benefits. So in a way, it helps also, but.